Okay, so we're going to do a short how-to video covering the best way, at least that I've found, to address pitting in steel frames, whether it's something like this original RZ500 wheel stand, or even the frame of a motorcycle. How to address the issue of pitting caused by corrosion. So here, see how close up we can get to this. But you can see we've got some pretty bad, the paint's been all removed here, but we've got some pretty bad pitting. Now, there's a few ways you could address this. The first thing you have to do, of course, is give it a thorough bead blasting or sand blasting. It's critical that you get any last remnants of corrosion out of these pitted areas. If you leave even the slightest amount in there, and then we put a coating over the top, eventually that's going to continue rusting, and it's going to eat through the coating or bubble up the coating at some point in the future. So first thing is thorough blasting, remove all possible corrosion. Then the next thing is, what is the best way to fill the pit marks? And some of them are pretty deep, certainly thicker than any number of layers of paint you could put on there. Even if you put 2 or 3 layers of paint on here, try to then flatten it back. Or if you just paint it, you're going to see the pits, because the paint will level out in the pits. It's going to be obvious. It's going to look really bad. You could try to Bondo it, but this whole frame here is effectively covered in the pit marks. Good luck trying to Bondo this whole thing and then sand all that Bondo back and get all the tubes round, etc. It'd just be nightmare. The other thing you can do is you can use a high fill primer, 2K primer, spray the whole frame, and put enough coats on that you can fill in the pit marks, and then enough layers on top of that so that when you sand it back, everything is flush and you can't see the pit marks. The problem I found with using a high build primer, 2K primer like that, depending on the quality, is you're going to get some shrinkage in the primer, and depending on how long you're able to leave the primer before you paint the top coat, there's always a risk, because you've got to put so many layers of high build primer on it to fill these deep pit marks. There's always a risk, even if you leave it a week or a couple of weeks before you put the top coat on, there's a risk that you're going to continue to see shrinkage of that high build primer. Also, I find even with the 2K high build primers, for something like a frame, or certainly something like this, which would be on the floor, placed on the floor, it's a wheel stand, so the bike's going to be in it. The high build primer is just going to be too soft, and there's going to be an easy risk of scratching, or putting press marks in the coating. So that's where, if you put this on a sharp edge and there's enough pressure on it because there's a bike on it, eventually that edge is going to dig into the soft primer, that's the high fill primer that's under the paint, and leave marks. So anyway, what I actually have experimented with, and I've had great success on motorcycle frames that are heavily rusted and corroded, is to actually powder coat primer the frame first. And what I do is I ask them to put extra thickness of the powder coat primer on there, and the powder coat is effectively like putting a plastic coating on it. very robust. It doesn't suffer with shrinkage after it's cured in the way that a conventional urethane primer can. Yeah, just very robust, and it can be put on at a lot thicker layers than high build primer or paint, significantly thicker. So that's what I've done. So yeah, I'll be doing the same thing with this, and I'll actually show you. So I'm going to take this to a local powder coater because it's a little bit too big for my setup. And they've done this for me before. I'm going to get them to put extra coating layers of primer on, and build it up so that we know for sure all the corrosion pit marks have been filled. But then I will take the frame back and I will actually sand back, because even with the powder coat primer on there, you know, the paint will always level off in the dips and the pit marks. So even when that's cured, if you look at it, you know, under particular light, you'll still see it'll be coated, but you'll still see where these pit marks are. You'll see slight sinkage in the surface of the powder coat. But what we do, I take the frame back and then I sand back the powder coat. So I'm gonna wet sand it until actually it's completely level. So I bring all the high points back until they're basically level with the powder coat that went into all the pit marks. And it may even expose a little bit of the metal again, but that's fine. And then, you know, once we've done that, we can decide, do we take it back and do the final coating, powder coat, which would probably be the best option, because this is going to be on the floor, you know, and subject to you know, being scratched and scraped on the floor. So, or you could paint it with 2K paint. Depends on how, you know, how good a color match we can get with the powder coat to the original paint. But yeah, so that's basically the process. There's not going to be too much to show from this point on, but I will, you know, as soon as I get the frame back, I will just show you me sanding the powder coat back until I get a nice smooth finish, and then we'll make the final decision with the client on whether we powder coat the final color or we paint it. And I'll just take you through that as well. But yeah, I thought, you know, since we got to do it for this, you know, it might be some good information for viewers out there who are faced with a similar situation. Okay, so I've got the bike stand back from the powder coaters. I asked them to put a extra thick coating of powder coat primer on here. And not sure if you can pick this up in the light, but you can see where all the pitting is. So the powder coating has gone into the pitting, but of course it'll level to the surface that it's on. So you still can see that pitting, but now it's got a thick layer of powder coat in the actual pit. So this was powder coat, thoroughly shot blasted before it was powder coated, to make sure we got any kind of remaining corrosion out of all those little pits. But yeah, you can see here, you can still see the pitting. But what we're going to do now is sand back this powder coat primer, and sand back the high parts. We're going to do that initially with a very rough or very coarse 150 grit sandpaper, dry, because powder coat sands a lot quicker if it's done dry, and you start with a very coarse grit. So the idea now is to sand back all of the high spots. What that's going to do is basically level the coating to the height of the powder coat that's in the pitting, and then that gives us a nice smooth surface, and all the pits will be filled, And the beauty of this method is, because it's a powder coat filling, we can then apply any coating we want on top. We can apply a temp baked coating like Cerakote. We can paint it. We can take this back and have it powder coated. But now, once we're done, because we smooth everything out, once we put the final coat on, this will look absolutely smooth. You'll never know that it had the high level of corrosion that it did. Okay, so I've finished sanding back the primer. So you can see here, particularly where I've sanded it all the way back in some areas to the metal, just to get the smoothest finish. But you can see here how the powder coat primer has filled all the nasty pit marks caused by the corrosion. So yeah, I started with 150 grit dry, and sanded everything down. You can see here as well where I've gone down to the metal. But yeah, so I'm very happy with that. I think once we get a top coat on, maybe we'll do a couple of top coats just for extra little bit of thickness. I think this is going to come out great. After final consultation with the client, we decide to go with the H151 Cerakote satin aluminium finish to match closely with the original OE finish. This will have to be baked at 250 degrees C for 2 hours to achieve an extremely robust and durable finish. And here we have the finished product. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.